Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next conference session entitled Total Access for Ambulant Disabled Fans. For those who are uncertain as to what ambulant disabled fans mean, it is disabled people who have reduced or limited mobility. Ambulant disabled people may require the use of walking aids such as walking sticks, crutches, or walking frames, and often find covering long distances difficult. This group of supporters benefits from facilities and services that are designed to reduce traveling distances and limits the need to stand for long periods. We have three great live panelists here today, and I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves. So, David, would you want to start?
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Gale. I'm on the Scottish Council for Muscular Dystrophy UK, and I am also a big football fan. I'm just going to describe myself. I'm an English white man in my late 30s. I have blonde hair. I have a black headset on, grey glasses, and I'm wearing a black hooded jumper. I also have a physical disability which affects my mobility. I currently live in Scotland, and I'm a long-time supporter of my hometown team, Catelijne United of the English League 2. And my national team is obviously England. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Matt or Catelijne, who wants to go next?
I'm fine to go next. My name is Catelijne Heijmann-Timmermanns. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm a supporter of Willem II Tilburg, my hometown football team, and of course the Dutch national team. And I like to go to lots of matches, especially in my hometown or the Dutch team, and to concerts as well. I have some mobility issues, balance issues due to a chronic disease. That's it, I guess.
Cool. So I'm Matt. I'm a male in my early 30s. I have shoulder-length brown hair and unfortunately a beard that is not shoulder-length. I'm wearing a blue shirt and I have cerebral palsy, so I use a walking frame. And I support Parma, the team in the second division of Italy. And my national team is Ireland, which is a bit of an odd combination.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We also have Nikki Baker, and she's an access officer at Level Playing Field in England. Unfortunately, Nikki cannot be here live today due to work commitments, but she has pre-recorded her answers, and we will watch that later in the session. And I'm also going to introduce myself. My name is Kate Ward, and I have long brown hair, and I'm wearing a gray sweatshirt. I am from the United States. I'm deaf, and I play on the U.S. Deaf Women's National Team. As you can guess, I am a supporter of the U.S. national team. Great for the women's side, very poor for the men's side. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our first group of questions. So David, we'll start with you. But before we do that, just a reminder, if you have any questions in the audience, put them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end. So David, as a match-going fan, what do you feel are the most common access barriers you face as an ambulant disabled fan?
Right. Thanks for the handover, Kate. I think one of the main issues regarding access for ambulant disabled supporters is, I think, there's poor information, but also the assumption that some make that basically wheelchair users are kind of the image that people have of a disabled person, and that sometimes goes against us possibly. I've been to numerous stadiums in the United Kingdom, and you tend to have to call to book tickets and explain your needs, such as needing less steps to a seat or what have you. But in my experience, they still sometimes get this wrong. I have an example from about 10 years ago. I was at the Johnston's Paint Trophy final at Wembley Stadium. My team, Carlisle United, were playing Southampton. I was told I would have only a couple of steps at the most to negotiate, but then to my horror, I got there and there was about 20 steps to negotiate, which caused me great difficulty. I've had similar issues at Old Trafford and Sunderland Stadium alike, to name a few, but thankfully that occasion at Wembley Stadium, the steward noticed my difficulty and put me in more accessible seating. This could only happen because it wasn't a capacity crowd. If it was a capacity crowd, it might have been more difficult for them to get me a seat. For Unfortunately, we got to the final the following year and actually won this time, beat Brentford 1-0, and they had suitable seating. So somewhere along the line, they learned the lesson, which was good. Other issues I've faced, parking isn't always great, particularly at older stadiums that weren't purpose-built with large car parks. Also, not all clubs have their accessible seating in good locations, be that the view of the actual pitch or the exposure to the weather. Toilets aren't always suitable, and sometimes even food kiosks, etc., aren't suitable either. Finally, sometimes even you can walk around the stadium and use steps, but due to the weather, they become slippery, and that's caused me a few accidents in my time. Well, these are just some of the issues I've faced when I've been on my travels. So, yeah, I'd like to hear other people's experiences.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And those are things that, not everybody thinks about. So that's great information, and thank you. So we know that you attended matches at Uefa Euro in 2020, and you were faced with a major barrier at a stadium during the tournament, which resulted in you missing 2 of the 3 matches that you had tickets for. Can you explain a little bit more about your experience, how that made you feel, and how the issue was improved?
Okay. Well, I was scheduled to attend 4 games during the Euros, including the final at Wembley Stadium. But my experience was ruined as 3 of the 4 games were at Hampden Park in Glasgow, because I currently live in Scotland. And I faced issues at the first game where Scotland were against the Czech Republic. I was parked at they had parking at a football centre, which was nearly about a mile away from Hampden Park Stadium, which obviously for somebody with mobility difficulties like myself with muscular dystrophy, it was going to cause me great difficulty. I was under the impression from the information on UEFA's website there would be some sort of shuttle service to get supporters over. But then I get there and I soon realised that this wasn't an option and not available. I spoke to a supervisor who tried to say I could get a taxi over, which was all well and good, but how could I get one back through all the busy traffic around the stadium? The supervisor's attitude really disappointed me, and they didn't seem to offer any solution and treated me like an inconvenience, basically. I wasn't going to risk a bad fall to watch Scotland, so I left the car park really angry and sent a strongly worded email to UEFA, the Scottish Football Association, and sought the help of CAFE. Due to my confidence being damaged, I didn't even attempt to go to my second game, which was Croatia against the Czech Republic, as I knew the option wasn't there. But I found out just the day before that game that shuttle buses would now be arranged, so I was able to attend the Sweden v Ukraine game in the second round, and there was shuttle buses over to the stadium, and one of the volunteers even recognised me and was not happy with how the organisers had dealt with me, and they were very apologetic. She even said that the supervisor actually got replaced, so make of that what you will. The shuttle bus, to be honest, wasn't the best either. It was difficult to get on and off, but I got across to Hampden in one piece, and once I was in the stadium, I was fine, which probably helps that I've been there before, so I knew what to expect, and there was golf buggies about to help people get around. I then proceeded to complain further and eventually got a refund for the 2 games I missed, thankfully through the help of CAFE. And then I just want to discuss my experience briefly at Wembley for the final. Basically, the seating and the facilities were great, but it was obviously well documented what a nightmare it was there due to all the terrible events happening with the supporters. But I did worry at one point I was going to get crushed at the turnstiles as I was near the front, but the people in front had dubious tickets and were not getting allowed in. They wouldn't move, and people behind were getting impatient and pushing people forward. This was very stressful, and how I stayed on my feet, I wasn't injured, was a minor miracle. from a COVID point of view, me and my uncle seemed like the only ones there with masks on during this as well. But worst of all, the stewards caved in and actually let these people in the stadium in the end. But I got in eventually in one piece. The facilities were as good as expected. I know I had a few stairs to climb. They were narrow and had banisters up, so I could manage these well. It was great to be there, England's first final in all this time, but it was ruined by all that went on, and it was quite a charged and violent atmosphere during the game. Not like any I've ever been to during a football match, and it was very uncomfortable. And I even think some of the unticketed people next to me were drunk and spoiling it for everybody around me. In the end, I thought Italy deservedly won, and I managed to get out and back in my car safely as I let the crowds disperse first. Saying that though, none of this has put me off, and I have tickets for the upcoming Women's Euros in England next summer. So, yeah.
Well, I hope that you have a better experience with this next upcoming tournament. That's really frustrating and just not good enough from, these organizations. So my next question for you would be, your condition is one that is progressive. How's your experience of going to matches now compared to when you first started attending matches? And do you worry that your condition will prevent you from going to matches in the future if stadiums do not provide services for ambulant disabled fans?
Okay, thanks. When I first went to games back in 1993, I could get up and down stairs with minimum fuss and pretty much sit where I wanted. But as my muscular dystrophy has progressed, stairs increasingly have become more difficult. So as a result, I tend to get accessible seating where available. And on occasions, I require crutches, which can sometimes cause issues at certain stadiums getting around. But if this wasn't available, it could cause me great difficulty not having the accessible seating and spoil my enjoyment of the game, as I'd sit and worry about things like going to the toilet, getting food, or leaving the stadium all throughout the game. I'm confident most of the bigger clubs and stadiums probably have suitable facilities these days, but I support a team from the lower divisions in England, and this isn't a guarantee further down the English football pyramid. Would all these issues stop me going? Probably not, but that's more my stubborn nature, personality. For others, though, this could be very off-putting and stop them going, which is obviously what we want to avoid, isn't it? We don't want people to feel like they can't go anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my next question would be, do you think clubs understand the problems that ambulant disabled supporters can face in these matches?
Most of the time, I think they try to understand, but as stated previously, I have on occasion contacted clubs as suggested, not always got the accessible seating I was promised. So this may suggest there's still a lack of understanding, not just from clubs, but also individuals that are working at the football clubs.
That's why I think conversations like this are so important. And what's one thing that you would like to say to these clubs and organizations and governing bodies that would help to make the experiences of ambulant disabled fans more accessible and inclusive?
I think clubs overall are getting better, certainly the bigger clubs. But I think for some lower down the leagues in different countries, possibly finances dictate what they can and can't do to their stadiums. I feel the governing bodies need to think about this more and try and help support clubs in improving their facilities. This can only be done by also having owners at clubs who have their supporters' best interests at heart. There is too much of a gulf in finances between the Premier League and the rest in England, and this isn't just regarding the players of the teams, but also the facilities and upgrades they can make to the stadiums. But fortunately, we have organisations like Cafe and Level Playing Field that try and fight our corner. So hopefully they continue.
Well, thank you, David. We really appreciate you answering all of those questions. And, that was great information and stories that you shared. So we appreciate it. I'm going to move on to Catelijne. So Catelijne, as a match-going fan, what do you feel are the most common access barriers you face as an ambulant disabled fan?
actually, a lot of the stuff David just said, I recognize. For me, what is important is upfront, clear information on the venue. Where can I park? How are the seats? How do I get to my seats? How are the turnstiles? Are they small, or can I get through with my crutches and my balance issues? The thing is, I tend to over-prepare maybe for going to a venue, because I know if I have to figure out what's going on at the venue itself, it will cost me energy, and energy I don't have, or not enough to do end the event and figure out what's going on around me. So that's important for me. Also, what I notice, a lot of venues, this is a bit of pet peeve of mine, they will have concession stands, but they will take the caps of bottles or open cans of soda you buy, because safety issues, I guess. But for me, that means I can't get a drink because I can't lug it around with my crutches. So stuff like that, just, make it easier for us if you allow us to do that. What else can I say? Walking can be difficult in a crowd. So if there's anything you can do to make it easier for us, have a different route or something like that that's less crowded, or maybe have people walk with us, something like that.
Yeah, I don't think people realize the amount of energy that disabled people expend on figuring out, whoops, I think you might hear my dog, that we spend figuring out where to go on a daily basis and how that's going to affect us and what we can do in certain situations. So I think that's a really good point that you bring up. And I'm also going to ask you about UEFA Euro 2020. You also attended matches there. So how did you find your experiences, and would you have liked any other services and facilities to have been provided?
Yeah, I went to 2 matches in Amsterdam, which was really nice. I have to say there was some confusion about parking. So it was late getting a parking spot reserved for me, which meant we had to pick up whatever stickers you needed to put on the car in Amsterdam itself. And even though I asked UEFA in advance, where do we pick them up? Can we actually drive up to the point where we have to pick them up? They never responded to me. So when we got to Amsterdam, we found out it was about a mile away that the first barrier were. And you had to walk to the ticket office to get the stickers. Luckily, my husband is somewhat more able. So he was able to go and get the tickets, though he is a heart patient himself, so it wasn't ideal. But we got the tickets and we got to park underneath the stadium, so no problem there. So that's one of those things that I think, UEFA should have anticipated that we can't go and walk a mile to get stickers to get to our parking spot. Also, I was in the Ambulant disabled seats, and they didn't clear the rows in front of our seats. So that meant as soon as the match started, everybody stood up, and I saw nothing but people in front of me. Now, due to COVID, the stadium wasn't at capacity. So I asked people in front of me, could they move a few rows down? And they were like, oh yeah, sure. So I was happy and I could see the match after all. But again, capacity, no way they could have moved. And that was the end of my match, basically. And of course, the issue with getting food and stuff like that couldn't be done because I can't carry it around. I have to say that lots of volunteers are very nice over there, and they were able to help me with that. So I'm not complaining that bad, but still.
Yeah, again, I think a lot of these things happen, and it's able-bodied people don't think about them, and people with disabilities aren't always included in conversations about it. So again, such an important conversation we're having. And I also wanted to ask you, you have told us that you sometimes attend other events in your wheelchair as it makes it easier for you to have a better experience and gain more access. So how does using your wheelchair at events make you feel? And do you feel if these venues provided services and facilities for ambulant disabled people, you would attend without your wheelchair?
It's, I use a wheelchair sometimes because I'm basically somewhere in the middle of using a wheelchair with crutches. How is my day going? How tired am I? So that also decides what to use that day. The wheelchair makes it easier to stand in lines. Like we said before, standing in lines is just a big issue. So with a wheelchair, it makes it easier. With a wheelchair, you also have a pretty decent seat instead of sometimes flimsy folding chairs that you wonder are going to survive the match. I'm not the smallest girl, so it's an issue for me at least. What I'm trying to think, what was the second part of the question? Yeah, what venues could do. Again, the issues I mentioned before, making sure that I can get into the venue easily, no lines or shorter lines, a way to get to my seat without having to move through the crowd too much. So I like using my crutches because it gives me better mobility, I think. So I would like to be able to choose that most of the time.
Thank you. And my next question is, and you've kind of covered it in some of your answers, but which have you attended events, like particularly non-football ones, that have catered particularly well to you? And can you tell us more about why you feel they have been a positive experience to visit?
Yeah, I like to go to concert as well, especially in Belgium, I have to say, because they really cater for disabled visitors very well. One concert venue I go to, they have volunteers from the Red Cross that will help you. They actually walk around the venue to see if they can offer their help to somebody who needs it. And they'll come up to you and tell you where the elevator is if you need anything from them. When you want to go to your seat, they will escort you to your seat. And I've always said it feels like being the president, because you have one guy in front of you clearing your path, one guy behind you making sure nobody runs you over, and one guy next to you who's helping you on steps and all that stuff. And after the concert is over, they'll come and pick you up and bring you back to the exits, so you can leave easily. I mean, they clear a path to the exit, so it's awesome to go there because it makes your life so easy. Another festival I go to in Belgium, Inter Vlaanderen, they have been, I think, a speaker at the conference. They take care of everything for disabled visitors. And it's really nice because you can email them, you can ask them questions, you can have everything arranged ahead of the concert. And when you go there, you go in a special entrance with shorter lines, and they will give you a wristband, which shows what you were allowed. You're allowed to on the wheelchair podium, or if you're allowed to go to accessible toilets or stuff like that. And you just have the wristband. You don't have to explain anything because you're on the list with what you can get. You get your wristband and off you go. And it just makes life easier. So I love going to venues and concerts in Belgium.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you said before, you don't have to expend energy worrying about, what's happening at that venue. So that's awesome. And I hope that more venues and organizations can do those things. So my last question for you is the same question that I had asked David. So what is one thing you would like to say to clubs and governing bodies that would help to make the experiences of ambulant disabled people a more accessible and inclusive one?
I think for me, the most important thing is the information. Get it, be as clear as possible, have it on websites. And if people email you or call you or whatever, answer them as quickly and as best as you possibly can, because the information, it will also help me to ask you if something is possible. So that's information.
Well, thank you for the information that you've given us. We really appreciate it. And I'm now going to move on to Matt. So, Matt, I'm going to start with the same question. As a match-going fan, what do you feel are the most common access barriers you face as an ambulant disabled fan?
I think I echo a lot of what David and Catelijne have said. Particularly the lids being taken off bottles. It's a small thing that just, I mean, using a walking frame, I have my hands full the entire time. I can't carry things mostly. But I think for me, the biggest problem I find going to different stadiums, and in a lot of cases the same stadium, is consistency. I don't know from one week to another what different information I'm going to be told, where I need to keep the frame, the amount of times I've been taken to a seat. Sometimes I'm allowed to keep the frame beside me. Sometimes I'm using it as a seat. Other times it's been taken away and I don't know where it is. I don't know who to ask for to get it. I also don't know how to describe it to someone. Because some people view it as a buggy, some people view it as a frame. It's just, consistency has been my biggest barrier. And yeah, just that along with what David and Catelijne have mentioned.
Yeah, that would be extremely frustrating, just not to know what to expect every time you go to a certain venue or concert or game. That would be extremely frustrating. So you attend football matches and other events with your walker in Ireland, and often at the same stadiums, you find differences in services and amenities offered. So, for example, what differences would be offered between like a football game and a concert? Have you noticed differences in those two events?
Yeah, so say the two largest stadiums in Dublin would both host different sporting events and different concerts as well. So I've been to GAA, rugby, football, and concerts in each of those two stadiums. And I found that even the routes I get taken through to go in is different. So if I'm going with friends and family, sometimes I'll be taken off a completely different route to them, and it's sort of potluck as to when I'll get to meet up with them next. That usually happens. So what I found with those concerts tend to be more considerate because it tends to be not as many people crowding in at the same time. So I'm able to go with my friends and family through the same entrances that they would take. And that's what's frustrating to me, is that I know there's more people coming through, generally speaking, in a football match, but why can't there be that sort of consistent channel? I know there is that route because I've taken it before, and then I've tried to explain it sometimes. Then I'm like, oh, no, we can't for health and safety, which just doesn't make sense because I would have taken it like 2 weeks ago in the same venue. And yeah, I'm going to keep saying it, but it's consistency. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I didn't realize that. So thank you for sharing that. And my next question for you would be, we have often heard of non-visibly disabled people encountering problems gaining access to facilities at stadiums, such as accessible toilets, accessible security lanes, things like that. You use a walker. Have you ever faced problems when trying to use accessible facilities?
Yeah, so there's been a couple of examples. So when I've gone to a couple of home games in Italy, the stadium's quite old. I know the first game I went to, they didn't really view, because I was using a walking frame, they didn't view the wheelchair, they didn't take me the accessible route through the stadium. I was told, oh, your seat is on the other side of the stadium. You therefore have to go around the back. And it was about a 15-minute walk, and this was not too long before kickoff. So that was not a great experience, and didn't make me want to go back there in a hurry, but I knew I wanted to anyway. And I suppose it was interesting that even when I went back the next season, and we were in the 4th division as opposed to being in the 1st division, so the capacity wasn't anywhere near what it was. I was then given more time. People realized, oh, this has similar needs, someone in a wheelchair, so they know to take me through a lift. I wasn't told the first time that there was a lift. Also, a few times, if I have been seated at a match and the frame has been taken away from me, if I'm standing, people generally would have to look twice to know that, say, I had a disability. So if I've been asking to go to the bathroom, people would not direct me to the nearest one. They wouldn't direct me to the accessible bathroom. They'd direct me to one that's essentially a million miles away from me. So it's just this disconnect over, well, and then once I started moving, generally people will make that, it's just people making assumptions, and then also not knowing where my frame is as well. And then again, just trying to explain that to people, because they make the assumption of, oh, they're looking for a wheelchair, or they're looking for a buggy, or they're looking for something else. So it's just, sometimes feel like we're sort of in that weird middle ground where, even though it's it doesn't fit this stereotype of disability that it's frustrating.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, do you think that clubs understand these problems? And what would you like to say to these clubs and organizing bodies that would make your experiences more accessible and enjoyable?
I think just knowing what to expect ahead of time. I mean, this isn't just in football. I get this all the time in airports. Like, I just want to know what's going to happen to my frame. Who can I ask to get it? Where will I be sitting? What's the seat going to look like? It's simple things that, like, people generally wouldn't have to think about. But for me, that really makes it makes a decision for me. It's like whether I'm going to go to that stadium, and just being given the opportunity to explain my needs and what I need to attend it comfortably. Because I'm not asking the world. It's just to be listened to, and to not make assumptions. And just to always be open to have that conversation about someone's needs.
Well, thank you, Matt. We actually had a comment from the audience, and they said, well, actually, this is to all of you guys, but thank you for sharing your negative experiences with us. We're really sorry that you had to go through this. So with that, Matt, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to introduce Nikki now, and she has a pre-recorded video in which she shares some of her knowledge from carrying access audits at sports stadia in England and Wales.
In your role with Level Playing Fields, one of your main areas is that you go to stadiums in England and Wales and carry out access audits on the services and facilities that not only football stadiums but sporting stadiums in general provide.
There are lots of things that can be done for differently disabled fans and ambulant disabled fans at sports stadia throughout the world, and a lot of them aren't necessarily that expensive to do. Some of them can be around policies and procedures, but some are more physical aspects. So some of the more physical aspects are things like putting handrails in, and that's on stairs particularly, to make it easier for ambulant disabled spectators to access any seating that they have available. Ambulant accessible toilets. Some of the things that policies and procedures that can be changed that make it a lot easier for ambulant disabled fans to attend games would be companion tickets, and some places do this just for wheelchair users, but it's strongly recommended to do it for ambulant disabled fans as well. Other policies are things like having an at-seat service for ambulant disabled spectators, so that if somebody struggles to get to a concession to purchase food and drink, having someone that can bring it for them is really, really helpful. Or if somebody wants to go and access the concession themselves, to enable them to actually be able to skip the queue, are just a few very quick examples of what can be done within stadia to help improve for disabled fans.
Thank you, Nikki. You touched upon on your answer there about ambulant disabled toilet cubicles. Could you expand a little bit as to what they are and how they differ from your standard accessible toilets?
Yes, of course. So an ambulant disabled cubicle tends to be in a set of general provision toilets, but it is slightly wider than the general provision toilet. It has a couple of handrails and it has coat hooks on the back of the door, and the door still opens outwards, but it is nowhere near as big as an accessible toilet and does not have enough space for a wheelchair user to transfer, not the standard provision of ambulant accessible toilets.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Nikki. Another question that we'd like to ask is, what are some of the best practice examples that you see when you do your matchday visits to clubs and to stadiums, that services that are for ambulant disabled supporters, and how they have helped to increase the matchday experience for supporters who are ambulantly disabled?
Okay, so one of the best things is obviously the seating arrangements for ambulant disabled spectators. So it's ensuring that the sight lines aren't interrupted or obstructed by either other spectators standing in front or any advertising hoardings, and this can make a real difference. Other services that can be sometimes used are things like a golf buggy. This will assist ambulance disabled spectators to, say, get from the car park to their seat, and this is really, really useful. One of the other things that we see around stadiums is actually flip down rest seats, so that for ambulance disabled spectators, they don't have to walk the whole way from either the drop-off point or the transport, wherever they've entered the stadium, all the way to their seat without being able to have any rest. So these rest seats are actually really, really important for people.
Brilliant. Thank you again, Nikki. And final question that we'd like to ask today is that stadiums that offer services for ambulance disabled supporters, such as you've mentioned previously, handrails on steps, wheelchair loans to help people reach the entrances from car park areas, flip down rest seats, are also beneficial for other types of supporter, not just disabled supporters. Can you explain how other supporters would benefit from having these services in place at stadiums?
Yes, so generally when you improve access for disabled spectators, improves access for everyone. Football generally is quite an ageing population of spectators, so there are many spectators who may be older who don't identify as being disabled, but rest seats will help them get to their seats. Will also be very useful with the handrails for elderly people, and also with distances where I mentioned golf buggies and with Amy mentioning wheelchair loans. That all really, really helps elderly people get to their seats, but also not just elderly people, other spectators who don't consider themselves disabled but may struggle with walking distances. It may also help people with things such as asthma and other disabilities, or from other spectators that don't identify as having a disability but could still benefit from these services.
Thank you, Nikki. Your insights have been really helpful, and hopefully people here today will be able to take some of the advice that you have given and will help to make some changes at their stadiums to improve the match day experience for ambulant disabled supporters, but that then will also have a knock-on effect and will help other supporters who attend their stadium on a regular basis. Thank you again for your time today, Nikki, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to speak.
Well, thank you. That was awesome from Nikki, and we're really glad that even though she wasn't live with us today, that we were able to hear about some of her experiences. So now that we've heard from all of our awesome panelists, I'm going to go ahead and ask each of you a question from the audience. So we'll go back and we'll start with David. So David, the audience is wondering if you received a written response to your complaints to Uefa and SFA about your poor experiences at Czech Republic versus Scotland. If so, did you find it satisfactory or acceptable?
Well, I use kind of Cafe as a mediator between the two. So I was using the help of Amy, contacting them and such like. And we eventually got there in the end, although I think it took them a while to confirm it with me. I think some people had previously had refunds or something and they missed me off or something, but we got there in the end anyway. And I just felt it was fair to ask for the money back because I couldn't attend the game, so through no fault of my own. So, yeah.
I'm really glad that you're able to, there's an organization like Cafe that you were able to, utilize to kind of, communicate about those things. And it's obviously a very frustrating experience. And I totally understand your request to, ask for money return. Like you said, it's no fault of your own. And hopefully that's something that they can learn from. I know that these are such large organizations, but I hope that they take things like this very seriously, because obviously every fan, no matter who they are, should enjoy the experience. So thank you for answering that, David. We appreciate
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Catelijne, question for you is that you mentioned sightlines are an issue when fans in the rows in front stand. What is the solution, and do we need elevated easy access seats for ambulant disabled fans?
Yes, I think we do need those, because the only solution to that is make sure that standing people won't interfere the view of people that have to stay seated. So clear a few rows in front or elevate.
Now, just out of curiosity from my perspective, do a lot of stadiums have these elevated rows, or is it more that they have to clear the rows in front?
I'm not quite sure. In the arena, they had to clear the rows in front. They didn't have elevated seats. And I think it's almost also the same for the wheelchair seats. But I don't know for sure.
Well, awesome. Thanks for answering that question. The last question we have is for Matt. So Matt, if you could choose one access improvement at stadiums, what would it be?
I suppose knowing who to ask when you arrive at the stadium. Like, I know there's the DAO and having that, but if you're arriving there as a away fan, or in my case, I'm going to Italy and I don't speak the language that well, it's like, having kind of that point of knowledge within the ticketing desk, for example, like, because that's the first point people tend to go to be able to talk to them, because the amount of times I've been in the middle of a stadium and I've asked countless stewards, how can I get to my seat? And they're like, I don't know, ask somebody else. So just having a reference point in each stadium to go to, that to look for, would be great.
Well, thanks, Matt. And we have a little bit of time, so I'm going to go ask both Catelijne and David the same question. So if you could choose one access improvement at stadiums, what would it be?
I think information's important. I think that's the key, and consistency. I think that's what we want, really.
I think our stories are very similar, and information is very important. And I think also what Matt said is you don't want to feel a bother. You just want to be a regular supporter for the game, and not feel like you're wanting too much by asking some small things of, where's my seat? How do I get there? I mean, really.
Yeah, agreed. And obviously my disability is a little bit different from all of yours. And I think that one thing for me that's been always difficult is asking for help. It's kind of a pride thing. You just want things to be easy, and for people to understand those things without you having to feel like a bother, like you said. So I appreciate all those things that you said, and I'm really grateful that I got to spend this morning, I guess it's morning for me, afternoon for you guys, talking about these things and having this, again, really important conversation. So thank you all. And I hope that this session has been insightful and informative. It's really been that for me. So thank you guys again. And coming up next is a session about DAO development in the future of the role, which will include insights from AC Milan and the Ukrainian Association of Football. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.